My name is Anya, and my story does not begin with my birth, but with my death. The autumn of 1978 was a cold fist closing around my heart. I was in my early 20s, but I felt ancient. My husband, Leo, an educated youth sent to our village, had died in a tragic accident on his way to work. They told me there was nothing left to bury. My grief was a bottomless well, and I cried until I was hollow, a dry husk of the girl I used to be. But life, with its cruel demands, did not allow me the luxury of shattering completely. Clenching my teeth until my jaw ached, I shouldered the burden he left behind. His widowed mother Clara and his two younger siblings Peter and little Sasha. They became my cross to bear, my penance for a love cut short. I worked my fingers to the bone, my back aching from dawn till dusk, ensuring Peter and Sasha never wanted for anything. My reward was seeing them both admitted to the best universities, their futures bright and secure in the city. Even Clara, who broke her leg in a bad fall and was bedridden for months, recovered under my constant care. I fed her, cleaned her, and tended to her every need until she could walk again. I gave them my youth, my strength, my very life. And before I even turned 40, my hair was shock white, my body was a ruined, aching vessel, and a doctor told me I had a terminal illness. I didn't want to die. A desperate animal instinct for survival clawed its way up my throat. Dragging my broken body, I made the arduous journey to the city, hoping the siblings I had practically raised would help me find a way to live. I never expected the cold, closed doors. I never expected the polite, sterile refusals. They had new lives, important careers. There was no room for the worn-out village woman who had sacrificed everything for them. So I drifted on the crowded, anonymous streets, waiting for death to finally claim me. It was there, amidst the gray indifference of the city, that I saw him. Leo. The man who was supposed to have died long ago, leaving no remains. He was wearing a sharp city-style suit, his arm linked with her, Elena, another educated youth from our village. He was alive, vibrant, and full of a swagger I had never seen in him. The truth, ugly and absolute, slammed into me. Leo hadn't died. He had faked his death to get rid of me, Anya, the simple village girl, and to shackle me forever as the beast of burden for his family. The accident was a lie. My grief was a lie. My entire adult life was a grotesque joke. A cold, clear fury, sharper than any sorrow I had ever known, filled the hollow spaces inside me. If my life was to be a pyre, I would not burn alone. I found their home, a nice apartment in a good part of the city. On a dark, moonless night, I locked the door from the outside, doused the perimeter in kerosene I had stolen, and set it ablaze. I stood and listened as the flames crackled and roared, as their screams turned from confusion to terror to agonized silence. The sound was a symphony of finality. Then I drank the rat poison I had carried with me. I closed my eyes, welcoming the darkness. When I opened them again, the world was drenched in a golden, familiar light. I was lying on a dirt path, the weight of a heavy sack of flour pressing me into the ground. I had slipped and fallen. I pushed myself up, my hands young and strong, and stared at my surroundings. The village green, the old willow tree, the distant mountains. It was all as it had been 20 years earlier. I was 20 years old again. A sound tore from my throat, half sob, half hysterical laugh. I had come back. I had been given a second chance. I hefted the sack of flour onto my back, my muscles remembering the strain. But instead of continuing toward Leo's house as I had done 1,000 times in my past life, I turned on my heel and marched straight home. My parents were shocked to see me return with the flour, my clothes dusty from the fall. Anya, what are you doing back? My father asked, his brow furrowed with familiar irritation. Didn't you say the Petrovs had nothing to eat and you were taking this to them? I stood before them, my spine straight for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Dad, Mom, I said, my voice firm and clear. I've thought it through. There's no future for me with Leo. From now on, I won't care about him anymore, and I won't send a single thing to his family. The look of stunned joy on their faces was almost painful to behold. Are you telling us the truth? My mother whispered, her eyes wide with hope. I swear it, I said solemnly. If I ever harbor even the slightest thought for Leo again, may I die a terrible death. Their happiness overflowed, though they pressed me for a reason for my sudden change of heart. I couldn't tell them I had been reborn from the ashes of my own vengeance. I simply said I had woken up and no longer wanted ties with people who had nothing to offer but their need. My first act of this new life was to reclaim what was mine. I remembered that this month's work points hadn't yet been allocated. In my past life I always gave them to the Petrovs. I rushed to find the village accountant, Uncle Zhang. He looked up from his ledger as I ran in, breathless. Uncle Zhang, my work points haven't been given out yet, right? He frowned. I was just about to allocate them to the Petrov household. Can you believe it? This month they only worked a little over 10 days. For a family of 4, that's nowhere near enough, Anya. They really treat you like a beast of burden. The words, which I had once brushed off with a lovesick smile, now felt like brands on my skin. From now on, I declared, my work points belong to me. I won't give them to the Petrovs anymore. His eyes went wide. Are you serious? You're not joking. I'm not joking, I said, the conviction in my voice surprising even me. I was foolish before, but now I'm clear-headed. I'll never help them again. A look of profound relief washed over his face. It's about time. But remember, you mustn't go back on this. I won't. Even if I die, I won't. With that first crucial victory secured, I felt a weight lift from my soul. I walked home, the future stretching before me, full of possibilities. But as I passed the reeds by the small river at the edge of the village, a sound made me freeze. It was a woman's voice, light and delighted. Leo, you came back too? That's wonderful. My blood ran cold. It was Elena's voice. Quietly, like a shadow, I crept toward the reeds. In the deepening twilight, I could barely make out 2 figures standing close together. I came back, Leo's voice confirmed, and it was laced with a bitterness I remembered well. Elena, I thought I was the only one who returned. I didn't expect my whole family would too. Heaven must be playing some cruel joke, sending us back to this poor and barren time. In our last life, our good days had just begun. And to think someone actually set fire to our home. If I ever find out who it was, I'll never forgive them. A silent, bitter laugh shook my frame. You'll never know, Leo. And you'll never have the chance. Elena's voice was a whine of complaint. Yes, since we were given another chance, why couldn't it be when the good days had just begun? The thought of having to face the heavy labor in the countryside again, having to scrimp and save, and having to go through the college entrance exam all over. She trailed off in frustration. Leo's voice turned cold and calculating. That's something we can't change. But since we've come back, Elena, from now on, we have to make the best use of Anya, that fool, and plan our lives ahead of time. Elena agreed readily. Yes, we can use Anya again. I'll string her along just like last time. Let her and her family work for us and earn work points. That way she can even take care of your chores and you and I can focus solely on studying. We'll do even better than in our last lives. Their words were not a surprise, but hearing them aloud, so callous and sure, fanned the embers of my hatred into a steady, burning flame. They had returned, and their first thought was to once again build their future on the bones of my labor. Not this time, I vowed silently. This time I am the trap you won't see coming. I picked up a few heavy stones from the riverbank. Taking careful aim, I hurled them straight into the reeds. The thuds of impact were followed by sharp cries of pain. In the pitch-black night, their secret meeting had just been violently interrupted. Before they could recover, I pinched my throat and let out a strange, shrill cry. Come quick. People are fooling around in the reeds. Catch them. My eerie shouts echoed through the quiet night, and almost immediately, I heard the shouts of the village patrol team responding. Who's out here fooling around? They demanded. I heard panicked scrambling from the reeds. Desperate to escape, Leo and Elena lost their footing and with twin splashes, tumbled straight into the icy river. It was the dead of winter and the water was merciless. They thrashed and screamed until the patrol team fished them out, dripping and shivering, to be hauled away for questioning. As I slipped away from the scene, a grim smile touched my lips. The game had begun. And this time I held all the cards. I slept deeply that night, my dreams untroubled by the ghosts of my past. They were no longer ghosts. They were flesh and blood, and I would deal with them in the waking world. I was awoken not by nightmares, but by a frantic pounding on our door. Anya. Anya, are you home? The voice was Clara's, Leo's mother. It was a sound that had once filled me with a sense of duty. Now it only stirred the embers of my contempt. I opened the door slowly, feigning sleepiness, to find her standing there, her face a mask of forced concern. She likely hadn't heard about Leo's misadventure with the patrol yet. She had waited all night for the flower I'd promised, and hunger had driven her to my doorstep. She wore a fawning smile that didn't reach her eyes. Anya, our family has no rice. You promised us a sack of flour. Leaning against the doorframe, I looked at her, this woman for whom I had emptied chamber pots and spoon-fed broth. Flour. I said casually. Oh yes, I did promise. But my mother gave it to my aunt yesterday. There's none left. The smile dropped from her face as if slapped away. Then what are we supposed to eat? The sheer entitlement in her voice, the expectation that my family's resources were hers to command, made my blood simmer. At that moment my mother came in from the yard carrying a cloth bag. Hearing Clara's words, her face immediately darkened. What your family eats has nothing to do with my daughter, she snapped, her protective instincts flaring. When did Anya ever promise you anything? What does she owe your family? I've never seen people so shameless. Can't use your own hands and feet. All you know is how to freeload off others. She glared at Clara with undisguised disgust. You people are filthy inside and out. There isn't a decent one among you. Your son was caught last night by the patrol for fooling around and is being interrogated right now. Instead of figuring out how to save him, you have the nerve to come here asking Anya for food. What? Leo was caught by the patrol? Clara froze, her shock genuine. The news of her son's disgrace was a far more immediate problem than an empty stomach. Panicked, she forgot all about the flour, turned on her heel and scurried away without another word. My mother shouted after her, "Stay away from my daughter. If I ever catch you tricking her into giving food or drink again, you'll see how I deal with you." After Clara was gone, she turned and poked me gently on the forehead. Let me tell you, Leo was caught fooling around with that Elena and taken away. He's no good. From now on, stay far away from that family. I hugged her, a genuine grin spreading across my face. I know, Mom. Nothing like that will ever happen again. You're amazing. From now on, if Claire comes again, just help me drive her off. Not just her. If anyone from the Petrov family comes to bother me, you and Dad should send them away too. Seeing my resolve, my mother was overjoyed. Don't worry. If those bloodsuckers dare cling to you again, I'll beat them to death myself. True to the village gossip, Leo and Elena were locked up and interrogated for more than 10 hours. They stubbornly refused to admit to anything illicit, claiming it was a coincidence. With no concrete evidence, the patrol had to release them, but not without punishment. Both were assigned double the workload under the guise of reforming their thoughts through labor. This was a devastating blow. Leo and Elena, with their reborn memories of comfort, were already struggling with the basic physical demands of village life. Now, buried under double the work, their carefully laid plans to study for the college entrance exam were in tatters. It didn't take long for Leo to come crawling. I was at home, happily devouring a bowl of ribs my mother had stewed for hours, savoring the rich, oily meat. He appeared at our door, his eyes instantly locking onto the steaming food in my bowl. I saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. Anya, he began, his voice strained. Could you help me? Not helping, I cut him off before he could finish, not even looking up from my bowl. Leo, didn't you like fooling around? Then keep at it. Why are you coming to me? No, Anya, I didn't. You were locked up by the patrol all night and still claim nothing happened? I finally looked at him, my gaze cold. Do you think I'm stupid? Let me warn you, Leo. Don't come looking for me again. I, Anya, am not that cheap. The shock on his face was almost comical. He had never been spoken to like this by me, the ever-devoted, ever-grateful Anya. His face darkened with a fury he could barely contain, and with a last furious glare he stormed off. I watched him go, a cold sneer on my lips. So, you've got backbone, huh? Let's see how long it lasts. His backbone didn't last 3 hours. That afternoon, Clara went to settle their work points and made the devastating discovery that mine were no longer allocated to them. She flew into a rage, quarreling with Uncle Jean, demanding my points be given to her family. After being thoroughly scolded, the reality of their situation finally sank in. With only a little over 10 days' worth of work points between them, a family of 4 faced genuine starvation. They had grown soft in my previous life, accustomed to living well on my labor. Now the prospect of coarse cornbread and wild greens, of going a whole month without a trace of oil or meat, was a torture they couldn't bear. People who have lived comfortably cannot easily return to hardship. The entire Petrov family descended into a panic. Clara came first, forcing a smile that was more of a grimace. Anya, my Leo has nothing to do with Elena. Don't believe the rumors. Oh, you're sure? No connection at all. None. Absolutely none, Clara swore, her hand over her heart. Then the two younger vipers, Peter and Sasha, chimed in, their faces the picture of innocence. Anya, my brother would never like Elena. The one he's always cared about is you. I looked at their lying faces, these children I had clothed and fed and nurtured into adulthood in another life. The betrayal was a fresh wound. I don't believe a word of it, I sneered. If they really have nothing going on, then let Leo and Elena come explain it to me themselves. Of course, Leo's pride revolted at the idea. But reality was a harsh master. With me refusing to feed them or do their work, Clara had to drag Peter and Sasha into the fields. Clara was weak, Peter and Sasha were lazy and incompetent. The three of them together couldn't earn half the work points a single able-bodied villager could. Meanwhile, Leo was drowning under his double workload. After a few days of this back-breaking labor and near starvation, they were all at their breaking point. One night they held a desperate family council behind closed doors. Peter and Sasha, who remembered their comfortable city lives, were the most vocal. Brother, go find Anya. If you don't, our family is going to starve and collapse from exhaustion. Leo looked at Elena, who was also suffering, her city-born delicacy no match for the harsh labor. She herself admitted defeat. Let's go find Anya. I really can't endure this. I don't want to work. I just want to live without effort. Cornered and desperate, they had no other cards to play. So, swallowing what was left of his pride, Leo went with Elena to find me. After only a few days, the change in them was startling. Leo's handsome face was sallow and thin, and a large, ugly scab from my stone marked his forehead. Elena looked even worse. The heavy labor had coarsened her skin and hollowed her cheeks, stripping away every trace of her refined beauty. Anya, Leo began, the words clearly tasting like ash in his mouth. I came with Elena to clear things up. There's really nothing between us. Elena chimed in quickly, her voice trembling. It was just a misunderstanding. I accidentally fell into the river and Leo acted bravely to save me. So, people misinterpreted it. I folded my arms and eyed them coolly, letting the silence stretch. But that's not what everyone's saying, I said finally. They say they saw you sneaking out late at night, even kissing. That's nonsense. Leo argued, flustered. Anya, you mustn't believe the gossip of those busybodies. I sighed as if weary of the whole affair. Whether you and Elena have something or not, it has nothing to do with me. You don't owe me any explanation. After all, you and I are just fellow villagers. Seeing me so detached, Leo panicked. He had no choice but to lay his cards on the table. Anya, I really do like you. Truly. I raised an eyebrow, a half-smile playing on my lips. Elena is standing right here. Are you sure you like me? Yes, he gritted out. The one I've always liked is you. Then swear it, I demanded, my voice dropping to a cold, hard tone. Swear it in front of Elena. If you're lying, may you be struck by lightning and die a miserable death. If you two really have a relationship, then may you both be cursed, childless, and hopeless for the rest of your lives. The color drained from both their faces. Leo didn't want to swear, but he was in too deep. Gritting his teeth, he recited the vile oath. I have nothing whatsoever with Elena. If I deceive you, may I be struck by lightning and die horribly. I turned my gaze to Elena. Your turn. Trembling with a mixture of fear and rage, she too muttered the same terrible words. I let my expression soften, a calculated move. Since you say you like me, Leo, then prove it. Send a matchmaker to my house with a proposal. This was a demand he hadn't expected. He looked genuinely troubled. What's the problem? I pressed, my voice taking on a sharp edge. It's just sending someone with a formal proposal. If you can't even do that, then you must be lying. My parents already said you're no good, that you never truly liked me, only wanted to use me. Unless you bring a matchmaker to my house, I won't believe you. He was trapped. He knew I wouldn't let go, and he couldn't risk losing me, his last hope for a life of ease. In his mind, he could always fake his death again after university. He had to play along. Anya, don't worry, he said, the picture of earnestness. I'll find someone. I'll bring a matchmaker. I will marry you. And so the serpent took the bait. The engagement was set. My parents, following my instructions, agreed but set one condition: a substantial bride price. They even spread the word that whatever bride price Leo's family provided, they would double it as my dowry. The Petrovs, ever greedy, latched onto this immediately. In their eyes, the dowry was a lifeline. Clara and Leo began borrowing money frantically from everyone, using my family's good name as collateral. They managed to scrape together a significant sum and presented it to my family in a grand public display, ensuring the entire village witnessed the transaction. My father made Leo swear never to betray me, with the village elders as witnesses. It was agreed that if Leo's family ever betrayed me, not a single coin of the bride price would be returned. They thought they had won. They believed that with this engagement, I would once again become their devoted slave. But they were wrong. The moment the engagement was formalized, I claimed I had injured my leg and took to my bed, not lifting a finger to help them. I left them buried under their mountain of debt, struggling to survive, while I watched and waited from the sidelines. The trap was set, and they had walked right into it. Now I only needed to wait for them to spring it themselves. The days following the engagement were a study in quiet tension. The Petrov family, buoyed by the belief that they had successfully reeled me back in, waited for me to resume my role as their beast of burden. But I remained in my parents' home, tending to my injured leg, watching their desperation grow from a distance. Their situation was dire. The debt from the bride price hung over them like a storm cloud. Clara, Peter, and Sasha were forced to labor in the fields from dawn until dusk, their soft, city-accustomed bodies screaming in protest. Leo, still saddled with his double workload, was a shadow of his former self, his handsome face now gaunt and perpetually etched with exhaustion. And then there was Elena. In my past life I had largely ignored her, a distant rival in a race I didn't know I was running. But this time her suffering was a source of dark satisfaction. With her scandal with Leo now widely known, the other villagers treated her with open contempt. The hardest, dirtiest tasks were pushed onto her slight shoulders. She had been waiting for Leo to persuade me to arrange easier work for her, but instead his engagement to me had only made her life more miserable. Unable to bear it any longer, she sought Leo out. To avoid suspicion, they reverted to their old habits of secret meetings. The reeds by the river were too risky now, a place of bad memories and painful stones. This time they chose the bamboo grove behind the mountain. Their plan was simple. Leo would go first to scout the area. When Elena arrived, she was to signal with 2 bird calls. If Leo answered, it meant the coast was clear. I knew their patterns. I knew their desperation. And I had been waiting for this. On the appointed evening, I slipped out of my house and made my way to the bamboo grove by a different, hidden path. I found a vantage point shrouded in shadow and waited. Soon enough, I saw Leo arrive, his movements furtive. He hid himself among the thick bamboo and waited. Not long after, Elena appeared at the edge of the grove. She paused, looked around nervously, and then made the signal. 2 short, sharp bird calls. From his hiding spot, Leo responded with an identical call. A smile touched my lips. It was time. As Elena hurried forward, eager to meet her lover, I lifted the slingshot I had fashioned. I loaded it not with a stone but with a heavy, smooth river pebble. I took aim, my hands steady, my breath calm. I let the projectile fly. It whistled through the air and struck the back of Elena's head with a dull thud. She crumpled to the ground without a sound. I waited. Leo, hearing the rustle of her fall but not her voice, grew anxious. "Elena," he whispered, stepping out from his cover. "Is that you?" That was my cue. I loaded another pebble, aimed and fired. It struck him squarely on the temple. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed next to his unconscious lover. I moved quickly then. I had no intention of killing them myself. That would be too clean, too quick. I wanted them broken, humiliated, and utterly ruined. I dragged their limp bodies closer together. I loosened Leo's trousers and tore open the front of Elena's blouse, arranging them in a compromising half-dress tangle. Then I melted back into the shadows and made my way to the village militia captain's house. I told him I had been gathering herbs near the bamboo grove and had seen 2 figures sneaking in, their behavior highly suspicious. I expressed my concern that they were up to no good, perhaps even stealing collective property. The captain, a stern man who took his duties seriously, immediately gathered a few men and followed me back to the grove. The scene they stumbled upon was exactly as I had staged it. I've suspected something between them for a long time, the captain announced loudly to the gathering crowd that had begun to form, drawn by the commotion. Ever since they were caught fooling around in the reeds, I've been watching them quietly. And sure enough, today in the bamboo grove I caught them half-dressed, clinging to each other. I immediately called people over to tie them up. Gasps and murmurs of shock and disgust rippled through the villagers. My God, the shameless pair really are having an affair. Didn't Leo just send a matchmaker to propose to Anya? How could he do something this disgraceful? Poor Anya. She's given her heart to Leo's family, worked for them, given them her work points, food, everything. And now, even after the engagement, he betrays her like this. Won't she want to die from the humiliation? Amid the rising tide of outrage, I made my entrance. I ran into the clearing, my hair deliberately disheveled, my face a mask of shattered betrayal. The moment Leo saw me, his eyes wide with panic, he blurted out, "Anya, it's not what you think." I didn't give him a chance to explain. I didn't need one. With a cry of raw anguish, I launched myself at him. My fists, hardened by a lifetime of labor, rained down on his face and body. You deceived me, Leo. You swore you had nothing to do with Elena, and yet here you are. You deserve this. I didn't hold back. 2 lifetimes of hatred, of being used and discarded, fueled my blows. He howled in pain, his nose bleeding, his lips split. The villagers, who despised a cheat and a user more than anything, did nothing to stop me. Some even handed me a stout stick, urging me on. Just then Claire arrived with Peter and Sasha in tow. Seeing Leo covered in blood, Clara let out a shriek and rushed to block me. "My poor son. Anya, why are you beating him? Stop, please. You still have the nerve to cry?" a villager scoffed. "Look at your son and Elena. Don't you see the truth? Your whole family is rotten. You've been colluding with Elena all along, using Anya to work like an ox and horse for your family." Hearing this, I turned my fury on Clara. I seized her by the collar, my face inches from hers. "So, you all knew Leo and Elena were carrying on behind my back. Then why did you come to my house with a proposal? It was just to exploit me, wasn't it? To make me keep sending you rice and flour." Before she could stammer a reply, I broke down in loud, dramatic sobs. "The Petrov family is truly vile. All those work points I gave you, all the grain and food. So it was all a lie. I won't stand for it. I demand to break this engagement. I want it ended immediately." My parents arrived then, their faces thunderous. "Not only will we end the engagement," my father declared, his voice ringing with authority, "but every work point, every bit of rice, flour, and oil your family tricked from our Anya must be returned." The villagers roared their approval. "That's right. How could you bully her like this? It's shameless. The Petrovs must return everything Anya gave them." "And as for Elena," someone else shouted, "she can't just get away with this. She knew Leo was engaged to Anya, yet she still had an affair with him. She must also be punished." I looked at Leo and Elena, bound and humiliated in the dirt. In their eyes I saw the death of their dreams. Their path to university, their future in the city, was gone, obliterated by the scandal. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had planned. That very day, with the village secretary and Uncle Zhang in tow, ledger in hand, we went to the Petrov household to settle accounts. Every single work point, every grain of rice, every drop of oil I had ever given them was meticulously recorded. They couldn't deny it. Under the weight of public condemnation, they had no choice but to agree to return everything. And the bride price they had scraped together at such great cost? According to village custom, since Leo had been caught cheating, he had no right to ask for it back. It was forfeit. The Petrovs had suffered a catastrophic loss. Their situation, already dire, plummeted into utter destitution. Leo, beaten and disgraced, was bedridden for days. My parents rightfully sent people to reclaim every single item that had ever come from our house to theirs. The Petrov family was left with nothing but a mountain of debt and the scorn of the entire village. The serpents had been exposed, their fangs pulled. But I knew the venom still ran in their veins. And I was not yet done with them. The weeks that followed the scandal in the bamboo grove were a symphony of quiet satisfaction for me. I tended my family's small plot of land, the work feeling light and purposeful now that it was for our own benefit. The air itself seemed cleaner, free from the cloying stench of the Petrovs' deceit. In their household, however, the atmosphere was toxic. Leo, once the family's golden hope, was now a broken icon. He lay in bed, his body healing slower than his pride, stewing in a broth of anger and regret. How had it come to this? In his reborn mind, he had been the master strategist, yet his plans had crumbled to dust at the hands of the simple village girl he so despised. The conflict didn't stay confined to his own thoughts. It spilled out in hissed arguments and accusing glares. Peter and Sasha, those two ungrateful brats who carried the minds of middle-aged adults in their child bodies, turned on him. "It's all your fault, brother," Sasha whined one evening, her voice sharp with a bitterness that belied her years. "Why did you have to sneak around with Elena? In our last life you two never met in secret like that." Peter, his face pinched with hunger and resentment, nodded vigorously. "Because you did this, everything got ruined. You two have to take full responsibility." But what responsibility could Leo take? The scandal was a permanent black mark on his record. The college entrance exam was now a pipe dream. The village cadres looked at him with open contempt. The Petrov family, already weak and voiceless, had become pariahs. Creditors came knocking daily, their voices growing louder and more impatient. Leo was forced out of bed and back into the fields, his body protesting every movement. He had only one pair of hands and the entire village despised him. No one would swap tasks with him, no one offered a helping hand. When people saw him, they turned away or spat on the ground near his feet. The scorn wasn't reserved for him alone. Clara, Peter, and Sasha were all tainted by his disgrace. They were always assigned the hardest, dirtiest labor, and even then the points they earned were a pittance, immediately swallowed by their debts. Their lives were a relentless cycle of back-breaking work and gnawing hunger, a far cry from the comfortable futures they remembered. Peter, Sasha, and Clara couldn't stand it. They had thought being reborn was a ticket back to the good life, not a descent into a hell worse than their original poverty. Quarrels and wailing broke out constantly in their shack, so loud the neighbors often gathered outside to watch the free spectacle. The venom, having no other outlet, began to seep inward, seeking a weaker vessel. That vessel was Elena. Aside from Leo, Clara, Peter, and Sasha, all blamed her for their misery. In their last life, she had been a respectable college graduate with a bright future. In this one, she was a ruined woman with no prospects, a millstone around their necks. Whenever Peter and Sasha saw her, they spat in her direction. Clara cursed her with filthy words whenever she opened her mouth. But insults alone couldn't change their situation. Peter and Sasha, spiteful by nature, understood clearly now that Leo would never again be their ticket to a better life. But they still wanted to rise. They still craved the comfort and status they felt they deserved. So the two of them whispered a new scheme to their brother. "Brother," Peter began, his voice low and cunning, "since things are already like this, why don't you just find a way to sleep with Anya and make it real? She already likes your face. Once you've taken her, she'll be hopelessly devoted to you. That'll ease your burden and we can climb back up again." Clara, hearing this, found the plan reasonable. "Leo, think about it. Elena can't even work properly now and her chance at studying is gone. If you marry her, she'll just be another mouth to feed. Do you really want to spend your days laboring like a mule? Are you willing to be worn out like this?" Leo, of course, didn't want that, but a flicker of his old feelings for Elena made him hesitate. Seeing his reluctance, his family grew impatient. In truth, they had only supported his relationship with Elena in their past life because of her potential. Now she had none. Why should they let her drag them all down? They quickly came up with a solution. They couldn't allow Elena to continue being a burden. They would have to get rid of her. The scheme was laid. Sasha was dispatched to find Elena, telling her that Leo wanted to meet at the old, crumbling temple at the edge of the village to discuss their future. Elena's days had been a special kind of hell. Not only was she targeted by the Petrov family, but the other villagers also treated her like a leper. Her reputation was in tatters. Returning to the city to study was impossible. Her only slim hope was that Leo would take responsibility. After all, she still held a flicker of feeling for the handsome man he had been. When she received the message, a fragile hope bloomed in her chest. She went to the meeting in high spirits, convinced she would see Leo and finally secure some promise of a future. But waiting inside the dark, dusty temple was not Leo. It was Boris, a greasy, opportunistic bachelor in his 40s whom everyone in the village avoided. Elena tried to flee, her heart hammering against her ribs, But Boris, smelling of cheap liquor and sweat, blocked her path. Now, little flower, don't be like that, he slurred. I've got treats for you. She struggled desperately, but she was weak from malnutrition and despair, and the temple was on the remote edge of the village where no one could hear her cries. In the end, she was forced down onto the cold, stone floor. Worse still, after Boris had his way, the commotion drew a crowd of onlookers, conveniently alerted by a concerned Peter. In front of everyone, Boris declared that Elena had seduced him. He even pulled food ration coupons from her pocket, planted there by Sasha, and revealed candies and pastries he claimed to have given her. Elena, sobbing and disheveled, denied everything, insisting Sasha had lured her there to meet Leo. But Sasha, standing in the crowd with wide, innocent eyes, flatly denied it. I would never. She's lying to save face. Leo himself, when he finally arrived drawn by the noise, was confused and angry. He hadn't asked his sister to do any such thing. With no witnesses to corroborate her story, Elena's pleas sounded weak and unbelievable. On the contrary, Boris's words and the evidence seemed convincing. After all, everyone had seen him lately, doing some of Elena's harder tasks in the fields. To the village, it seemed obvious. The fallen city girl had traded the last of her dignity for a bit of food and an easier day. Her reputation, already ruined, collapsed completely. When Boris later sent someone to propose marriage, Elena refused, but it was meaningless. In this era, for a woman, a destroyed reputation was a life sentence. Leo witnessed the whole thing. He was devastated. He truly had harbored feelings for Elena. But every time he recalled the sight of her, exposed and humiliated with Boris in front of the entire village, his heart twisted with revulsion. He had wanted the pure, untarnished, educated youth, not one defiled by a filthy old bachelor. Now, no respectable girl in the village would ever look at him twice. He was left with only two choices: marry the ruined Elena or turn his eyes back toward me. Before, he had dismissed me as a simple-minded workhorse, devoid of the cultured charm he craved. Now my competence, my strength, and my family's standing became glaring advantages. If he could somehow force me to marry him, at least someone would shoulder the endless burdens of his household. He tried to approach me in the days that followed, offering strained smiles and awkward greetings. But I never gave him the slightest chance, always turning away or being called away by my mother before he could speak. Seeing this, his family grew desperate. Their plot to dispose of Elena had only deepened their own misery. Peter and Sasha began following me, their young eyes tracking my movements with a disconcerting adult malice. I noticed them, of course. I knew full well what kind of treacherous snakes they were. Their scheming was as transparent as glass. Up until then, I had been content to let them destroy themselves with the consequences of their own greed. But since they insisted on throwing themselves into my path, I decided it was time for a true reckoning. I would accept their challenge fully. I pretended not to notice the little shadows on my trail. I even created the perfect opportunity for them. One night, the village was showing an outdoor film, a rare and exciting event. I deliberately went alone, making a show of wanting to find a good spot. It was the perfect bait. Peter and Sasha, seeing their chance, scurried off to inform Leo. So when I made my way home, taking a path that led past the now infamous reed marsh, a figure suddenly leapt out from the shadows and grabbed me. It was Leo, his breath smelling of desperation. Seeing him succeed, Peter and Sasha ran off, presumably to fetch Clara and a witness crowd. Anya, Leo murmured, his grip tight on my arm, mistaking my lack of immediate struggle for compliance. The one I've always cared for is you. I never liked Elena. She was the one clinging to me. I said nothing. I simply waited. Emboldened by my silence and hearing the distant raised voice of his mother calling his name and rallying a search party, he hurriedly fumbled with his pants, intent on forcing himself on me and making the situation a public fact. That was when I struck. My movement was swift and precise, born of a hatred that had been honed over 2 lifetimes. I drove my knee upward with all my strength, crushing his most vulnerable flesh. A strangled, guttural sound escaped his lips. His eyes bulged, his features contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated agony before he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Then I lifted the heavy, jagged rock I had positioned nearby earlier. I didn't hesitate. I brought it down on his leg again and again, the sickening crunch of bone a satisfying counterpoint to the memory of his lies. I didn't stop until I was certain the limb was destroyed beyond repair. Only then did I toss the stone into the murky water of the marsh and melt away into the night, my heart a cold, steady drumbeat of vengeance. When Clara, Peter, and Sasha arrived with a crowd of villagers, what they found was not a compromising scene that would bind me to them, but a bloodied, unconscious Leo, his body broken in the reeds. As for me, I was already home, my alibi secure, waiting for the news to come. The news, when it arrived, was delivered with a kind of grim satisfaction by our neighbor. Old Petrov's boy, Leo, they found him in the reeds. Looks bad. Real bad. They're taking him to the town hospital. I allowed a look of appropriate shock to cross my face. What? How? Was he catching fish? Doesn't look like it, the neighbor said, lowering his voice. Seems like he was up to no good again. Got what was coming to him if you ask me. But his leg's a mess. They're saying he might lose it. My mother shot me a sharp, knowing look. She had long since stopped believing in coincidences where the Petrovs were concerned. I met her gaze with a calm innocence that told her everything she needed to know without a single word being spoken. Leo was rushed first to the town hospital, then transferred to the county one. The diagnosis was as grim as I had intended. The damage to his leg was too severe. It had to be amputated below the knee. And during the examination the doctor delivered a second, more emasculating blow. The injury I had inflicted had crushed one of his testicles. The damage was irreversible. Leo would never again be a complete man. Of course, when I had struck, I hadn't intended to let him off lightly. 2 lifetimes' worth of hatred had been crystallized in that moment. In the past he had schemed to use me up and discard me, and I had hated him to the core. If he had chosen to live quietly this time, I might never have found the chance to settle the final score. But his family's malice knew no bounds. They still wanted to bind my corpse to their sinking ship. Since he sought my utter destruction, there was nothing left to discuss. I've always been someone who pays back every tooth with blood. If Leo wanted to die, I was more than willing to oblige. But death was too kind. This was better. The news that Leo had lost a leg and been unmanned caused Clara to faint several times in the hospital corridor. She wailed and cursed, vowing to report the attack to the authorities, to have me arrested. But Peter and Sasha, those 2 venomous little beasts, stopped her. They were clever enough to understand the risk. If the police investigate, they'll find out brother was trying to force himself on Anya, Peter hissed, his child's face grim. At most, she'd be judged to have acted in self-defense. And you, he glared at his mother, you'd be held responsible for his actions. They might even take me and Sasha away. When they explained the risks, Clara broke into a cold sweat. As an adult, she would bear the brunt of the blame. Peter and Sasha, though sly and cunning, were still minors in the eyes of the law. She couldn't risk having the truth come out. In the end, she abandoned the idea of reporting me, forced to swallow the bitter pill of her son's ruination. Leo, the most wretched victim of his own plot, remained unconscious for 3 days. When he finally woke and realized the full extent of his injuries, the shock made him faint again. When he woke once more, he flew into a frenzy, thrashing and shouting on his hospital cot until Peter and Sasha had to pin him down. Clara covered his mouth, trying to soothe him through her own tears. Son, we never expected it to turn out like this. Damn that Anya, she's vicious and shameless. We won't let her go. Just wait. This grudge will be avenged. Peter and Sasha crowded close to his bedside, their voices a discordant chorus of false comfort. Brother, revenge is a dish best served cold. Even if it takes 10 years, we will help you get even. For now, you must endure. And so, the matter of calling the police was quietly dropped. By the time Leo was discharged from the hospital a full month later, walking with a crude, painful-looking crutch, life in the Petrov household had gone from a desperate struggle to an outright tragedy. With Leo crippled and unable to work, all the labor fell onto Clara, Peter, and Sasha. Day by day they struggled on, their bodies growing thinner, their faces more gaunt. The college entrance exam came and went, but neither Leo nor Elena was qualified to take it, their reputations and records permanently stained. Before long, Peter and Sasha reached the age when village children typically started school. But who would work the fields if they went? Clara couldn't manage it alone, and Leo was useless, a drain on their meager resources. Their dream of education shattered before it could even form. They could only watch, their hearts filled with a corrosive envy, as other children carried schoolbooks while they bent their backs in the dirt. Their hatred for me grew deeper, a festering wound. They hated that I wasn't the same docile fool from the past life. They hated that I refused to be their beast of burden. Their eyes, whenever they chanced to see me in the village, were sharp as knives. If looks could kill, I would have been dead 1,000 times over. But in reality they could do nothing. They couldn't fight me, couldn't out-argue me, couldn't touch me at all. Time passed. 3 years slipped by. I was 23 and my life was blossoming. My parents, freed from the worry of my obsession with Leo, had carefully sought out a good match for me. He was a soldier from a neighboring village, a man named Alexei with a steady gaze and a kind smile. His family was respectable, his parents were warm and welcoming, and he had a bright future. After meeting once, we both felt a mutual respect and affection, and the matter was quickly settled. My parents, overjoyed, didn't demand a bride price. On the contrary, they prepared a generous dowry for me. I was at home, joyfully embroidering linens for my new home when the news came. Clara Petrov had gone to the mountain to cut wood. She had slipped and fallen into a ravine. Like her son, she had lost a leg. When I heard, I set down my needlework and walked to the window. I didn't feel joy, not exactly. It was a colder, quieter feeling, the satisfaction of a debt being paid in full. In my last life, Clara had also broken her leg. I had thought with a second chance she might have learned caution. But some fates, it seemed, were inescapable. Or perhaps, I mused darkly, some people were simply destined to fall. Now with 2 cripples in the family, Peter and Sasha had no hope of schooling. They had to shoulder the burdens of adults, their small frames buckling under the weight of feeding and caring for their broken family. A few days before my wedding, I returned from town with a bundle of dowry goods, fine cloth and new pots, and encountered the siblings on the path. They were staggering under loads of firewood, their faces pale and gaunt, their clothes little more than rags. Sweat dripped from their grimy brows. When we came face to face, both looked at me with eyes full of a pure, undiluted hatred. I smiled, a sweet, gentle smile that did not reach my eyes. "How does it feel?" I asked, my voice soft as a whisper. "Harder than last time, isn't it? Worse than death, isn't it?" At my words, both of their faces turned ashen. The knowing tone, the specific reference to last time, it shattered their remaining illusions. You came back too," Sasha stammered, her voice trembling. "That's right," I said cheerfully. "I came back with you. You 2 ungrateful little beasts." I let the smile drop from my face, my voice turning to ice. "In our last life I poured my heart out for you. And how did you repay me? Did dogs eat your consciences?" They were struck dumb, their mouths agape, unable to reply. Their silence only fueled my mockery. "In the last life, because of me, you ate well, dressed well, and had the chance to study and leave this place." I took a step closer and they flinched back as if struck. "In this life, without me, I want to see whether you have the ability to change your fate." I let my gaze sweep over their pathetic, ragged forms. "From the looks of it, that's impossible. After all, you still have 2 cripples at home waiting for you to care for them." I paused, letting the weight of their hopeless future settle on them. Then I added, my voice light again, "By the way, did you enjoy the gift I gave you?" They blinked in confusion. Then realization dawned on Peter's face. "So, what happened to our brother? That was your doing." "Of course," I replied smoothly. "Why shouldn't it be? You're too vicious." Peter shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and rage. "What did my brother ever do to deserve that?" I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Did you really think I didn't know what you all did to me in our past life?" They stared at me, their horror complete. "You knew," Sasha whispered. "Of course," I said with a bright, terrible smile. "Do you know how your family died in that last life? It was me who set the fire." "It was you." The words were a choked gasp. "That's right. You refused my pleas for help, left me with nowhere to turn. And then I saw Leo and Elena alive and well." My smile vanished, replaced by a gaze as hard as granite. "Did you really think that when I was on the brink of death I would let you beasts go unpunished? No. I made sure that when you gathered together, I sent you straight to the king of hell." Under the burning hatred in their eyes, I laughed again. "When I was given another chance, I swore I'd make you suffer lives worse than death. Leo and Claire are already living that fate. Now, I said, taking a final step forward. It's your turn. Their faces went deathly pale. What do you mean to do? Peter stammered. I leaned in close so only they could hear. I already told you. You'll live, but it will be a life worse than death. And next it's your turn. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving the two of them trembling in the middle of the path, exchanging panicked, terrified glances like frightened birds. The hunters had become the prey and they knew it. Their suffering was not over. It had only just begun. The fear I sowed in Peter and Sasha that day on the path took root and festered. From then on, they lived in a state of constant jittery terror, their eyes darting around corners, always waiting for my next move. They became thin, nervous creatures jumping at shadows. The weight of their labor and the burden of their broken family were crushing them, but it was the dread of my promised retribution that was truly eating them alive. But I had no need to dirty my own hands further. The one who would deliver the final, cruelest blows was not me. It was their beloved former sister-in-law, Elena. I had not been idle in the 3 years since her public shaming. I had quietly, carefully, cultivated a source of information. I would occasionally leave a piece of salted meat or a bag of flour on the doorstep of Boris, the bachelor. He, in his simple, greedy way, was easily bought. In exchange, he would tell me snippets of gossip, especially about Elena and the Petrovs. One day I mentioned to him, as if in passing, how strange it was that Elena had been lured to the temple that day. It's almost as if someone set her up, I mused aloud. I heard Sasha Petrov was seen near the temple just before. I wonder why she would do such a thing. It was a seed planted in fertile soil. Boris, who felt cheated that Elena had continued to resist him after he'd been framed as her lover, needed little encouragement to direct his resentment. He passed the rumor along, and it eventually reached Elena's ears, now a hollow-eyed, hardened version of the delicate city girl she had once been. She couldn't return to the city. She was trapped in the countryside, her life in ruins, her body and spirit broken. How could she accept it? She had long suspected a trap, and now she had confirmation. She hated Peter and Sasha with the white-hot intensity of someone with nothing left to lose. And she wanted revenge. The cruelest punishment isn't death. It's leaving someone alive to suffer. And Elena's revenge, born from utter despair, was especially vicious. He bided her time watching their patterns. She knew they often went to the stream to fetch water late in the afternoon, when the sun was low and the path was secluded. One day she lay in wait. As Sasha bent over the water with her bucket, Elena emerged from the bushes behind her. She didn't make a sound. She simply swung a heavy, gnarled branch. It connected with the back of Sasha's head with a sickening thud. The girl crumpled forward into the shallow water, unconscious. Elena acted quickly. She had brought a small, covered pot, its contents still steaming from a hidden fire. She pulled the lid off and without a flicker of remorse she poured the boiling water over Sasha's face. A sizzle, a smell of scorched flesh. Sasha, even in her unconscious state, let out a gurgling moan. Elena didn't stop to look. She vanished back into the undergrowth as quickly as she had appeared. Peter, who had been lagging behind, arrived a few minutes later to find his sister face down in the stream, her features already blistering and swelling into a hideous, unrecognizable mask. He screamed, a high, panicked sound that brought other villagers running. Sasha was carried home alive, but horribly disfigured. The village doctor could do little. The burns were severe, she would be scarred for life. The Petrov household, already a pit of misery, descended into a new circle of hell. Sasha's agonized whimpers filled the shack. Clara, hobbling on her crutch, could do little to comfort her. Leo sat in a corner, his face a stony mask of impotent rage. Peter, now the only whole person in the family aside from his crippled mother and brother, was terrified. He started carrying a knife, his eyes wide and paranoid. But Elena was patient. She waited for weeks until the village's attention had moved on from Sasha's unfortunate accident. She watched Peter, who now did his chores in a frantic rush, always looking over his shoulder. His task was to chop wood for the winter. He did it at the edge of the village, near the tree line, where he felt he could see anyone coming. It was his one moment of relative peace. It was there that Elena found him. She didn't approach from the path. She crept through the trees, silent as a ghost. He had just set a log upright on the stump, his axe raised high. As the axe began its descent, she lunged. She wasn't aiming for his body. Her own knife, a small, sharp kitchen blade, flashed out and swept across his face. Peter screamed, dropping the axe and clutching his eye. Blood poured through his fingers. Elena didn't flee immediately. While he was blinded by pain and blood, she grabbed his hand, the one holding the log steady, and with two brutal, precise chops she severed 4 of his fingers. His screams this time were not of panic but of pure, unadulterated agony. When he was found, he was lying in a pool of his own blood, his right eye destroyed, his left hand a mangled ruin. The entire Petrov family, piece by piece, was now disabled, each one physically ruined. They could only cling to one another in mutual misery, a grotesque tableau of suffering. The blind, the lame, the disfigured, and the mutilated. The village was shocked, of course. There was talk, an investigation of sorts. But Elena had covered her tracks well. There were no witnesses. And given the Petrovs' reputation and the fact that Sasha's accident was now linked to Peter's mutilation, a dark consensus emerged. The family was cursed. They had brought this upon themselves with their scheming and wickedness. No one looked too hard for answers. While they lived in their pit of agony, my own life unfolded in splendor. My wedding to Alexei was a joyful, vibrant affair. The entire village came, their happiness for me a stark contrast to the whispers about the Petrovs. My soldier husband was everything Leo was not. Strong, honest, and his kindness was not an act. He looked at me with respect and admiration, not as a tool to be used. A year after our marriage, his commendations and promotions earned him a posting at an army base in a larger town. I followed him, leaving the village and its ghosts behind. Later, as he continued to rise in rank, we moved to a proper city apartment. I brought my in-laws and my own parents and younger sister to live with us, ensuring they would know only comfort and respect in their old age. I had a child, a strong, healthy boy with his father's eyes. I watched him grow, surrounded by love and stability, a world away from the struggle and betrayal that had defined my first life. Occasionally, news from the old village would trickle back. The Petrov family had become a cautionary tale, a unit of wretchedness so complete it was almost mythical. They survived on the barest charity the village was forced to offer, their existence a living testament to the consequences of greed and ingratitude. I never thought of them with pity. The memory of my own death, the feel of the cold poison in my throat, the sound of their screams in the fire, these were the pillars of my second chance. They had earned every moment of their suffering. My vengeance was complete. It was not a single, fiery act, but a slow, meticulous unraveling. I had taken their future, their health, their dignity, and finally their hope. They were alive, but they were already in their grave. And I, Anya, was finally free. I had rewritten my story not as the victim but as the architect of my own destiny. The ashes of the fool had been swept away, and from them, a woman of steel and resolve had risen, her heart at peace, her future bright, and her enemies left to rot in the hell they had made for themselves. The city air was different. It didn't carry the scent of damp earth and wild greens, but of coal dust, industry, and a strange, bustling promise. Our apartment was small but clean, with real glass in the windows and water that came from a tap inside. To my parents it was a marvel. To me it was a fortress, putting physical distance between my new life and the ghosts of the old. Alexei was a good man, steady and kind. His love was not a tempestuous, consuming thing like my childish infatuation for Leo had been. It was a deep, calm river, reliable and life-giving. He knew I carried shadows from my past in the village, though he never pressed for details. He simply built a present for me, for us, that was so full of light the shadows had nowhere to hide. A year after we moved, our son was born. We named him Misha. He had his father's strong brow and my mother's bright, curious eyes. Holding him, feeling the solid, warm weight of him in my arms, was the final seal on my new life. This was what I had been fighting for. This future. This peace. The cycle of bitterness that had defined my past would end with me. Misha would never know such treachery. I threw myself into motherhood and into building our home. I learned to navigate the city markets, to cook on a modern stove, to make friends with the other wives on the army base. They were women from all over with different accents and stories, and none of them knew of Anya, the village fool who had been used and discarded. Here I was just Anya, the capable wife of the promising officer Alexei. We would often have my family and Alexei's over for dinner. The small apartment would be filled with laughter and the smell of stewed meat and fresh bread. My mother would dote on Misha, her face, once lined with worry for me, now soft with contentment. My father and Alexei's father would talk politics by the window, their voices a comfortable rumble. In these moments, surrounded by this simple, profound happiness, the memory of my first life felt like a story I had read long ago, tragic and vivid, but ultimately separate from the woman I was now. Yet I was not so naive as to believe the past was entirely dead. I had ensured its ruin, but ruins can still cast long shadows. I maintained a quiet, discreet line of communication with Uncle Zhang back in the village. It was not out of lingering hatred but a strategic vigilance. A cornered animal, even a broken one, can still be dangerous. His letters, scrawled on cheap paper, were my tether to that world. They were full of village gossip, whose daughter had married, whose cow had died, the yield of the harvest. And always, almost as a footnote, there would be news of the Petrovs. The crippled ones are still a burden on the collective, he wrote once. The boy Peter does what he can with one hand, but it is little. The girl Sasha never leaves the house now. Her face, it is a terrible thing. The mother, Clara, nags and complains without end. And Leo, he just sits by the window and stares. They are a pitiful sight, a lesson to all on the wages of sin. I would read these passages with a cold, detached satisfaction. Pitiful. Yes, they were. But they had earned every ounce of their pity. I felt no urge to return, to gloat, to see their misery for myself. Their suffering was a fact, like the weather in a land I had left behind. It no longer had the power to touch me. My life was here, in this bustling city, with my son's laughter echoing in our home, with my husband's strong arm around me at night, with the future stretching before us like a wide, open road. Alexei was being groomed for greater responsibility. There was talk of him attending a military academy, of a posting to Moscow. Our world was expanding, while the Petrovs had shrunk to the four walls of their crumbling shack. One afternoon I took Misha to the city park. He was learning to walk, his chubby hands gripping my fingers tightly as he toddled on unsteady legs. The sun was warm and the city sounds were a distant hum. As I watched him concentrate, his little tongue stuck out. A profound sense of peace settled over me. This was the victory. Not their destruction but my construction. I had built this. I had fought for this quiet joy with the ruthlessness of a general, and I had won. The past was a ghost. It could whisper on the wind, but it could no longer shape my days. I had taken its pain and its lessons and forged them into armor. And within that armor my new family thrived. Years turned like the pages of a book. Misha grew from a toddler into a lanky boy, all scraped knees and endless questions. Alexei did indeed attend the military academy in Moscow, and we spent 3 years in the vast, intimidating and thrilling capital. I learned to navigate the metro, to appreciate ballet, and to host dinners for Alexei's colleagues. I was no longer just a village girl. I was a city woman, an officer's wife, a mother. We eventually settled in a larger city, a regional hub, where Alexei was given a significant command. Our life was full, respectable, and happy. The memories of my first life were like old photographs, faded and tucked away in an album I rarely opened. It was during a visit from my sister, who had stayed in the village to care for my aging parents before they eventually joined us, that the final shadow of the past was brought into the light. We were sitting in my modern kitchen drinking tea while Misha did his homework at the table. "You'll never guess what happened," my sister said, her voice dropping into a gossipy tone. "Back in the village." I felt a familiar but distant prickle of anticipation. "Oh, it's the Petrovs. The last of them." I took a slow sip of my tea, my face a mask of mild curiosity. "Go on." "Leo," she said, and saying his name aloud in my clean, bright kitchen felt like invoking a ghost. "He's dead." I set my cup down. Made a soft click on the saucer. "How?" "Sickness, they say. A fever that settled in his lungs. But everyone says he just gave up years ago. He was a shell. With Clara passing 2 winters back, the cold was too much for her. With only one leg, there was no one left to care for him. Peter and Sasha, well, you know what became of them. They can barely care for themselves." I nodded. Peter, the one-handed, half-blind woodcutter. Sasha, the disfigured recluse. They were still in the village, living on the very edge of existence, permanent fixtures of pity and scorn. "There was no proper funeral," my sister continued, a hint of macabre relish in her voice. No one would pay for it. The collective just disposed of the body. Peter and Sasha didn't even come out of their house. It's as if he was never there. Disposed of the body. The words were so final, so utterly devoid of dignity. This was the end of the handsome, swaggering man who had once made countless girls sigh. This was the end of the man who had plotted to use me, fake his death, and live a life of comfort on my broken back. Not in a blaze of glory, not even in a blaze of my vengeful fire, but in a quiet, sordid, anonymous end. Erased. A strange emptiness filled me. It wasn't grief. It wasn't even satisfaction anymore. It was simply nothing. The last ember of that all-consuming hatred had finally cooled to ash. A sad story, I said, my voice even. My sister looked at me, her eyes searching mine for a trace of the old pain. She found none. They got what they deserved, Anya. After what they did to you. They got what they chose, I corrected her gently. Their choices led them to that end. My choices led me here. Just then Misha looked up from his books. Mama, what's a collective? I looked at my son, at his clear, untroubled eyes, so full of the future. He would never know the weight of work points, the sting of village gossip, the bitterness of betrayal. It's something from a long time ago, my love, I said, walking over to him and smoothing his hair. It's not important anymore. And it wasn't. The story of Anya and Leo, of the Petrovs and their scheming, was over. It had ended not with my death in a city street, but with my life in this warm kitchen, with my son's question about a world he would never have to understand. That night, after my sister had gone to bed and Misha was asleep, I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. Alexei came and stood behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. You're quiet tonight, he murmured. Just thinking, I said, leaning back against his solid chest. About how lucky I am. He kissed the top of my head. We both are. I was free. Truly, completely free. The last thread tying me to that old vengeance had been severed. Leo was gone. His family was broken beyond repair. The score was settled, not in the dramatic fashion of my first death, but in the slow, inexorable grind of a miserable life and an unmourned passing. I had my victory. But more than that, I had my life. I had a husband who loved me, a son who was my pride and joy, a family safe and content. The girl I had been, the desperate, lovesick fool, the vengeful arsonist, was gone. The woman I was now had been tempered in the fire of that past, but she was not defined by it. The past was finally, irrevocably past. And the future was all that mattered. I turned from the window, took my husband's hand and left the shadows behind me for good. The end.